Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 66 of the Miami Tech Pod. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Caesar and Brian. And I'm really excited because I'm also joined by one of my favorite people on this planet, Jeanine Suah. Welcome to the podcast, Jeanine.
Thanks for having me.
What up, what up?
What up?
Well, for those of you who don't know Jeanine, you've definitely been living under a rock. But you wear many hats, but I would love for you to kind of, including that one, which I was sporting this morning as I walk my dogs. But would love for you to kind of introduce yourself. I know you're a Florida native, so kind of take us a little bit through kind of your upbringings and how you ended up in Miami Tech.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, obviously, thank you for having me. My story is kind of all over the place, but that's how I like it because I like to keep things interesting. So the long and the short of it is born to Jamaican parents, grew up in Orlando, had a passion for language. So I got my bachelor's and master's in applied linguistics and Spanish and Portuguese, and basically really spent my entire career focusing on how the brain processes and develops language for second language learners. So moved to Brazil, spent some time there, but really kind of got this calling in 2016 to join this huge, like 30,000 square foot co-working space that was tailored for tech companies. And so in that space, I was just super exposed to tech. Not really, having been an academic, I didn't really understand how tech worked. I just knew that I wanted to be a part of it. So fast forward a couple years, launched a pop-up co-working concept. Like community has always been a thing for me, like huge Jedi community builder, but it's because, again, those Caribbean roots. And launched our first brick and mortar, which is what brought me to Miami. And of course, we launched in the midst of the pandemic, February 2020. COVID happened in March. We ended up closing the space at the end of April of 2021. But in that, I learned how to basically scale a 10-person in-person community to a 3,500 founder community globally by way of tech. And so that was kind of just like the entry point of my realization that like tech is really cool. And it kind of spun into a whole bunch of things that I'm sure we'll talk about soon.
And currently you are an XIR at Brex. How did you end up at Brex? And can you tell us a little bit about what an XIR is?
Yes. So I actually wound up at Brex by way of like LinkedIn. It was kind of serendipity. At the time, I was building out a solution that focused on making content, specifically business content, just more digestible and actually more fun as it relates to learning for adults. And so I had been posting a shit ton of, can I say shit?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. I've been posting a shit ton of content. And I actually saw one day that somebody that I was connected to from a year ago, Shai Goldman, posted this role called X in Residence. And I was like, what the hell is an X in Residence? I've heard of entrepreneur in residence. I've heard of VC in residence, but never like X. So at the time that I was building, I was, of course, going through, this like, okay, what do I really want to do? How do I want to spend my time? And everything that I had said that I wanted to do like 6 months prior wound up on that sheet. So I was like, I don't just want to be a founder. I want to be a founder. I want to invest. I want to create content and I want to build community. And I was like, I don't know how the hell I'm going to make it happen, but I'm going to figure it out. So then when I saw Shai post this role at Brex, it was like, are you an ex-founder, an aspiring VC? Do you like building community? Do you like creating content? And I was like, oh my God, I'm sold. So within, I sent Shai a message. Within 10 minutes, we were on the phone. And within 2 weeks, I had a role. So essentially what the role entails is part of the go-to-market strategy team. I'm just, like I just said, a founder who's building out scalable solutions for Brex to be able to go to market in these local tech hubs, but also leveraging my community building resources and also my skills in the founder community, in the investor community, to really just build Brex's founder and partner community in a more meaningful and authentic way, instead of like shoving the product down your throat. It's like, hey, let's throw this party, or hey, let's invite you to dinner. And then if business spins from that, then that's cool. But it was just more so meant to be something that was a little more community centric and community focused.
Yeah, I when you said kind of unique experiences, I know I went to a scavenger hunt you hosted in Wynwood, which was so much freaking fun. But can you explain a little bit too, in case anyone's not familiar, what is Brex?
Absolutely. So Brex is a leading neobank for startups and unicorns. A lot of people know us as like the corporate credit card, gold card, like Amex Platinum for startups. But recently we've shifted into an all-in-one finance tool. So we're basically, if you could take Amex Platinum, JP Morgan Chase, your QuickBooks, your payroll, everything into one platform, that's what Brex would be.
And how much of your role is focused on that community building here in Miami versus other cities in the country or even in the world?
That's a great question. I would say about 85% of it is focused in Miami because that's where I started. My roots are here. But now, since we've shown a lot of success in Miami, and now also that I have like a pretty strong community, but still wanting to grow it in Miami, Brex is giving me the opportunity to go to different markets like LA, Atlanta, Tampa, and then also just like in New York and places where a lot of the tech scene and like Web3, for example, NFT NYC, our whole team is going. So it varies, but I would say 85% Miami.
That's fascinating. So you would say this is a bit of a blend between like an ambassador role and like a BD role, right? Where it's
pretty much.
And it, you know, in my mind, like it's super smart, right? Like this is, you know, nobody loves the hard sell. I think a lot of people in, you know, sales functions or even some BD roles are like way too short-term transaction driven and not like we're going to build a relationship with founders and create a community and like that could result in business or not. But, you know, ultimately those are the inputs we're going to put into it. Do you feel like you've seen or Brex has seen like a good ROI on that model versus the like we're just going to hire a million salespeople and just hit up founders on LinkedIn?
That's a great question. I would say community-wise, we've definitely seen an ROI specifically as it relates to impact on social. So our reach, so our team is super, super new. The program is maybe 7 months old. I would say in the 4 months from the beginning of the year to like mid-April, our team had already 3x'd our social impressions, and we're able to see basically a holistic view of keywords that are used when Brex's handle is associated with it. And the difference from last year to this year is completely different. So it was like last year, it was like a lot about our competitors, about just like problems that people were having. And now we can see people are using more words like love, inspired, community. So it's really cool to see that from the, I would say, social media perspective and engagement perspective, but it's also translating to dollars for the company because now our founders are entrusting us and we're the first person that they go to when they're like, hey, I'm ready to sign up for Brex. What do I do?
Yeah, it's probably like a good brand building tool and a way to like lower customer acquisitions costs too, right? Like, you know, you can spend millions of dollars on TV ads or billboards or whatever it is, or you can like go build these experiences that everybody talks about, everybody shares about, and like then you're getting top of funnel engagement that way, right? So
100%.
Yeah, smart, cool. More companies should do that.
I agree.
Jeanine, do you think that's something that's like a repeatable model for others? Because like, if you had told me 3 years ago that people would be partying with their bank, I would be like, who am I? Like a high net worth individual that's being wined and dined? Like, to me, that would have sounded like ridiculous, right? But do you think this is something that like other sectors of the like service provider ecosystem can replicate? Or
Brian, like chill on the like partying with their bank thing. They're not a bank, you know, like.
I would say yes.
This is my regulatory hat on here. Like, unless you have a bank charter we don't know about, but.
Yes, it is scalable. And that's part of one of the responsibilities of our team, which is why our team focused on bringing in key people who were ex-founders, because the goal is to make sure that this can be scalable. Because of course you can spend a whole bunch of your energy doing one-on-ones with founders, hosting events, but ultimately we have to be able to track and measure which one of these is yielding the highest results. And so part of what we're working on now is our strategy to be able to replicate it and put it into, I call it my formula for the sauce, because everybody's like, oh yeah, y'all have the sauce, but I'm like, okay, cool. Well, what's the formula? Then the goal at the end of that is to be able to say, hey, this is what we did to be successful. You should test it. You may have to make a couple tweaks, but it definitely has the potential to be scalable. And that's what we're working toward as a team.
You know, how have you seen kind of, obviously you all have a lot of data, right? From, you know, credit card transactions and all of that. It's no surprise that we're going through a bit of a, you know, economic downturn, recession. There's a lot of startups out there that are tightening their belts. Have you seen that affected, since you're so close to the founders in the community? Like, have you actually seen those results either anecdotally out there in the field or through that data?
Yes and no. We've definitely seen things slow down. Like from my team's perspective, my founders have slowed down a little bit because they're trying to be more cautious and just re-strategize. But as it relates to Brex as a whole, I haven't seen anything yet in terms of that type of data, but I have seen it from an emotional standpoint of founders just kind of like being a little weary, but at the same time, they're very optimistic in how they're going to move forward with their business.
And so, Jeanine, I know you were recently again in the news that we covered on Refresh about the launch of Rezilyent Capital. So congratulations on launching that.
Thank you.
Can you share a little bit more about, you know, what prompted you to start it and what, you know, what you guys will be focused on?
Absolutely. So recently launched Rezilyent Capital, as you just stated. Rezilyent Capital is going to be an angel syndicate that allows for accredited and non-accredited investors to invest alongside me. And the goal is to invest in dangerously resilient founders who are building a future of work and community. So very similar to what we were just discussing in terms of being able to identify and pinpoint that data that can basically translate the work and the efforts that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis into concrete tactics that people can implement by way of strategy. Those are the types of founders that I'm looking to invest in. What really prompted it was two things. One, I saw certain groups of founders weren't having the same amount of access as other founders. And so I was like, okay, well, there's a couple ways that we can solve for this. And one of them was creating more investors. Like I have friends all the time who are asking me, how do I invest? How do I do this? How do I invest with you? And I'm like, okay, there's an easy solution, right? And so basically leveraging the power of community, because I'm such a firm believer in leveraging community as a go-to-market strategy and also a growth strategy, and pooling our dollars together and investing in some of the best founders out there. So very excited for that. And already have a couple deals lined up. One of them actually was invested into by Mark Cuban. And so he spontaneously is kind of, Brian, to your question, developing this dope platform that enables us to connect all of our accounts and then leverage that data based on output and be able to say, okay, this is where you should be spending most of your time. And this is what translates to the most dollars. So it's super, super cool in that sense.
How big is the investor syndicate?
So, right, big in terms of how many people or big in terms of just fund?
Yeah, both.
So right now, I mean, in a week, I've already gotten 50, well, 2 weeks.
In a week, oh my God. I'm like, I'm asking you this question as if you've been like, I forget, it's like fresh off the press here.
Super fresh off the press. I would say in the last 2 weeks since the announcement, we've gotten 50 investors, and a lot of them are already like, so some of them are just like operators, founders, and then some of them are accredited investors. And then in terms of the fund size, so it's on a deal by deal basis because we're leveraging WeFunder as an SPV.
Sure.
So minimum check size will be 50,000, and then we can go up to 250, honestly, up to whatever the community wants, because we're not limiting that, but our sweet spot is anywhere, or will be anywhere from 50 to about 200K.
And that's the actual like SPVs check.
Correct. The SPVs check.
Contributors to the SPV.
Yes.
So, like you were saying that anybody, accredited or non-accredited, can jump into this. Like, so where do they go to find out more information on how to participate? You know, how to see the deal flow and all that stuff. You know, is it like AngelList that has sign up for this, or is there a special way for people to get involved?
So the first step is to visit the website and then register using the Airtable. And I'm building out actually the community and how it's going to be structured. And it's basically right now a Slack channel, because it's similar. It'll be similar to AngelList in terms of the overall logistics and structure, but the way that it's done, because it's on a deal by deal basis using Reg CF, it'll have to be done on the platform, each deal. So the community will be on Slack. We'll do comms by way of email, Slack, all those things. And then the deals themselves will be made on a private page by way of WeFunder.
All right, Jeanine, we got all the badass stuff you do out of the way. Let's talk about Miami for a second.
Yes.
You know, what do you think has surprised you in the last year? I mean, we know we don't have to rehash all of like the the excitement and the movement to the city, but what were the things that you can honestly say like, whoa, I didn't see that coming out of where we're at in Miami Tech right now, sitting June of 2022?
That's a great question. I would say I honestly didn't expect so many people to move here. Like the first wave, yeah, cool. I get it. But long term, people are actually like moving and uprooting their entire lives to be here, because they're realizing that not only do we have beautiful beaches, beautiful weather, all these beautiful just kind of terrain, but we more so have like a strong ecosystem that is intentional about building together. And when I first got to Miami, like I was like, oh, okay, cool, Miami. I moved here specifically because I'm like, oh, if I want to build a global company, what better location to be than in a city that has access to the world? But I wasn't expecting it to be like this, blown out of proportion, where everybody is moving and consistently moving, but actually wanting to be a part of the ecosystem that's here. I think that's the most exciting thing to me.
Yeah, I feel like I love having these conversations, because every conversation I have with someone who's moved here, I pick up on something new that they love about the city, and they're just like all in. They're not just, yeah, they're like you said, they're uprooting and like they're buying properties. They're not just like, oh, I'm gonna rent and check it out. They're just like, no, this is home now. So it's been so exciting to see and kind of see how they fall in love with the city. But of course, you know, we still have stuff to work on. So is there anything that you were like, you know, I really love if we improve this about the city, or I want a startup to tackle this problem that is more specific to Miami?
I would say, I mean, this is just something that's near and dear to my heart. And I feel like I'm a broken record, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I don't give a shit. When it comes to founders, specifically Black and Brown founders being funded, that is something that I would like to see. And I'm actively becoming a part of the solution to that. So it's not just like a lip servicing, like we need to fund more Black founders. Like, nah, there are like some really dope companies who are coming out of Miami who should be funded. And 90% of them, I would say right now, like some of the bigger ones are being funded, but actively coming up with that solution to build the community around it, which is what we've been actively working on doing, but then also building in some pipelines to capital for underestimated founders who just may not be, you know, have access to it in terms of a social capital level or just like an overall resources level. And I do want to say, I do commend the mayor's office for building out the Venture Miami program, specifically the opportunity program that Kanasha was leading, because it's a first step, right? You had 10 women who were able to build out their programs, but also meet with some VCs. And I think that it's, you know, it's not an overnight solution, but it's a step in the right direction, I believe.
Would you say this is the most diverse tech community in America?
Ooh, I don't know. Diverse for sure in terms of thought and in terms of what I've seen. Like, I don't see one person who looks the same, but I also appreciate, and I think that's part of why I love what each individual person on my team is building, because each individual ecosystem is so different. And as it relates to diversity, I don't know where the most diverse one is. I'm still learning that myself. It's definitely a diverse one, but I can't speak to whether it's the most diverse.
Yeah, I feel like this is something we can actually figure out, right? Like there has to be data on this that we could dig into and kind of measure up cities against each other on that metric.
For sure.
I think that's a tough question as far as the like which is the most diverse community you've experienced and stuff, you know, because like that puts like, you haven't been everywhere, and no one's like, it's not like you're, being surveying every corner of every community and all that stuff,
Yeah.
So,
Each community it has its own identity, and that's what makes communities so cool. It's just a matter of like, is this the right community for you, type of thing.
Right. And and I think every community has its own sort of like combination of ingredients and sort of its own mixture of ingredients, because like from a diversity standpoint, Miami has a lot more Hispanic, Latinx, founders and community members than Atlanta, but Atlanta has a lot more Black people than Miami, both the city and the tech community as well, or you go to San Francisco and there's a lot more Asian, folks there, or LA or whatever it is, right? And so, the makeup is it's going to change from city to city, and so it's tough to like compete, right? I think a better way of looking at it, and this could be me being stupid, is like, how do we focus on inclusion, right? Because like making sure that everybody who's in that community geographically can be included in the stuff that's going on, wants to be included, and is aware of all the opportunities available, and can thrive,
No, I agree with that.
Because it's not like we can force people to migrate from different parts of the country here, I mean, they did on their own, but I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that. Maybe I'll get canceled for this or something. Who knows?
I don't think you'll get canceled. I think inclusion is, that's accurate. And I don't disagree with that. So if you get canceled, I'll get canceled with you. But inclusion is a big deal and I think it's like a big component of the DEI like framework. But it's true. You can have all the diverse people you want, but if people don't have a way in, then that's where you're going to kind of come and run with the hiccups. So I agree with you there.
Yeah. DEI is such a like well-intentioned, but often poorly executed, like corporate strategy or corporate element, because there's so many companies that'll like fudge the numbers and say like, oh, well, we have a diverse workforce, but then you look at like the C-suite and there's zero inclusiveness there, right? It's like there's no women, there's no minorities, there's no whatever, and so like, but then they'll say, but we have 100,000 employees that are minorities. Like, yeah, sure, 1,000 miles from the headquarters, or something.
No, it's true. They'll manipulate the numbers. And that's why I think like part of the reason why I'm so passionate about investing in future of work and just like community as a whole is because there are some really phenomenal founders who are building out solutions to be able to at least take the data and look at it for what it is versus taking whatever these companies are saying as a lip service and just being like, oh, well, we're going to invest in this many founders, or we're going to do XYZ with this demographic of people. But it's like, no, you actually have an opportunity to leverage the talent that you have, your existing talent pool, and figure out how to empower them so that they can move forward. Because future of work to me and diversity to me, more importantly, is diversity of thought. And companies, it's been proven like when you have different types of people operating on a team, you're more likely to succeed because you then have different perspectives. No one group is a monolith. And so that's where, when I talk about diversity, like obviously, and inclusion, like you want different people to be at the table, but not one person is the same. So by having different people from different demographics, I was going to say gene pools, which is not what I was going to say, but demographics, I'll just kind of say holistically, like that's when you can really leverage that power and set yourself up for success because you have different people who are thinking differently. I feel like I said different like 60 times. It's true. It's so true. Like, look at our team. It's like, I don't think Shy was like, oh, I need to hire a Black woman. I need to hire an Asian man. I need to hire a Jewish man. I need to hire a non-Jewish white man. It's like, no, we just had different skill sets that kind of contributed to each other. And because of that, we're working towards success as a team, but he's going to see things that I don't and vice versa. So I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to stop.
No, this is great. I didn't realize the team was that diverse. It's amazing. Go Shy.
Oh, yes. Granted, I'm the only woman and Shy recognizes that, but I also am very vocal. So I'm gonna.
You basically make the space for 3 women.
Exactly. And I don't mind because like I a lot of my friends are guys too. So it's just like I love my team. My team is solid.
And then I have to say, plug, like, if you don't follow Jeanine on LinkedIn and Twitter, she does the best. She mentioned she likes to create content earlier, but I love her videos. Every Monday, I'm like, this is a great start to my day. There's dancing. There's
Thank you.
So I think you put a smile on so many people's faces. And you do a lot of content around just educating people and like demystifying some of the terms that are used that kind of might make people feel like, oh, I don't belong, or I don't understand. And so I really commend you for that.
Thank you.
I think like it's really interesting to me how there's this sort of thread. Like, we touched on it earlier of like community throughout your career trajectory, you know. And like I had this theory that I think I discussed with Maria at some point years ago, that like people used to like cycle out of Miami because they never found their community. They didn't find their friends, you know. And I think like we're starting to, like, I think Michael posted, or someone posted on Twitter, that like they were seeing a lot of people going back to San Francisco now, or going back to New York from Miami. You know, and I suspect a lot of that's they didn't make friends. They didn't find their tribe here, you know, and that's fine. But it's interesting to think about, like, finding your tribe could be a key component to like customer retention, you know, because we're all customers of the geography, you know.
I mean, and I think, sometimes you have to be more intentional and like to really try to seek it out. And because sometimes people might move and just be like, I'm expecting the community to find me. And it's like, no, you need to make an effort.
Oh, girl, 100%. And that, I think, is what shifted for me during COVID, of when I realized, like, COVID obviously gave us so much downtime to think about things, but I was always like, oh, I love being a go-to resource for people. But COVID was really when I was like, no, I'm going to get to know the people who are building in Miami, what they do, how they do it, and how I can help support them in that effort. And once I change it, change it. Sorry. Once I changed my mindset, that's when I started to see my tribe start to form, where now friends with Maria, friends with Michelle, like women who I just knew of. And Maria, I do want to commend you specifically for this, because it was in April when we closed the space, and I was like, girl, I don't know what I want to do. And I remember we had a call and you were like, well, how can I help? I said, I really want to start getting more involved and more embedded in the ecosystem. And you invited me to that party. And since then, it really opened my eyes to like the types of people that I wanted to surround myself around. So I know that everybody knows you as like master community builder, master connector, but it's something as simple as it relates to tribe, something as simple as inviting somebody somewhere and having it, you know, build on top of that. So for that, I wanted to say thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. I'm so glad you came that night, because it was, this was so much fun in general. But I think something that you touched on is kind of like the mindset of like giving first and how important that is. And like, I think, you know, coming into any community, figuring out how can you add value before you're trying to extract any value from it is super important.
A formula. It's part of the formula. Like I think people are also being very strategically intentional with like, we know that we're going to benefit each other at some point. So how can I support you? And in turn, it will always come back to you. You may not see it immediately, but it will. And it has, and it continues to do it. So I will continue to give, because that's just in my nature. And in that turn, the community will continue to benefit from it. So I agree with you for sure.
You know, I'm kind of curious, like coming full circle back to the resilient stuff, you know, like, do you have a thesis on how, like, what the future of work looks like? And like, because we went through this recent shift where like it was an abrupt shift to remote work for a lot of people. Now it's sort of a trickle back to hybrid, you know. But like, what do you think is the next evolution of this? Because it ties in, like, I have my own theories, but like, I want to hear yours as to where this is going, you know, and how it ties into like a lot of your background and your sort of your unfair advantages is how I like to think of it.
I love that. I am a big and firm believer that the future of work will be deeply rooted in connectivity and productivity. So, and that can be, and I use those two words because it can be open to any industry's interpretation of whatever that means. So whether the Web3 communities focus on how do I better connect my members and offer them more utility, or how do the members within my community get the right thing done more often. But I firmly believe like future of work, but also future of work, life, and play is going to be deeply rooted in solutions toward connectivity and productivity. Because people have realized like we can do shit a lot better and we can do it in less time and with less headache. How do we continue to solve for that? So that's why I'm very, very excited for the future of work, but also as it relates to Rezilyent, community's not going anywhere. And just as Caesar mentioned, of like brands are starting to recognize that you actually having like boots on the ground and leveraging that existing community to continue building community and leveraging that for go-to-market and growth strategies, like brands are starting to recognize that loyalty lies in people and brands who have the strongest communities. So that's, I hope that answers your question, but that's where I see the future going in terms of tech solutions being built.
Yeah, I kind of going off of that. Yeah, kind of, traditionally it's always been like 40-hour work week, whatever you get accomplished then. But I feel like now it's moving towards, it matters more what the output is, regardless of how quickly you got there. Right. So that's one shift that I'm hoping, because yeah, there are certain things that are kind of like that compound, and you might get something done much easier because you've spent 10 years figuring that out. Exactly. But I also feel like really interested in like how it's almost like people are becoming their own brands and companies. Yeah. And so I feel like historically, like a company owned you and you couldn't represent anything else and you couldn't do anything else outside of that. And I think anyone who continues to see that way is going to be short-sighted. And I think we both work for companies that understand you wear many hats and they'll all kind of come together and go back to like that whole work life. But it's less about owning you as the entire person and just kind of leveraging the brands that you've created of yourself. Exactly. I don't know.
No, it's true. I tell people, when people ask me, how can you do so many things and still be at Brex? Brex basically paid for my likeness for 18 months. And I say that because it's like, no matter what I do, whether good or hopefully like not so good ever, but the more doors I get into because of who I am, the more Brex benefits from it. And they recognize that allowing people to be themselves and just providing the resources and support to kind of amplify that benefits the brand 10 times more than if they try to control every move that I make. So I definitely agree with you on that. And the same with Florida funders too.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, Brian, you wear different hats. You work for the mayor's office, for like founded Refresh. So yeah, I think if we didn't work for companies that allowed that, it would be a much different experience.
I don't think I've ever worked on just one thing, like ever. And so I don't know if that's I don't know if that's like my personal ADD, which Maria has accused me of many times, or just that like. Look, I think the whole idea of like you got to sit at a desk and work on one thing for 40 hours a week is an antiquated like modality. Like I think there's plenty of jobs that I know of that like you could do the whole job in 2 to 5 hours a week, and be as productive as someone sitting there for 40, Right. But like I'm wholeheartedly believer in the outcomes are what people should be paying for, not for that person's personal time and stuff,
I agree with you. And I'm also interested to know, if I'm allowed to ask questions, interested to know what your thoughts are, where the future of work is going. Because you didn't tell us that yet.
Do you want me or Maria's opinion?
No, I gave mine. It's your turn.
It's your turn.
I mean, look, I think communities, micro communities, office communities, like how our relationship to work and to our employers has changed dramatically over time, and this is also something like a broader like macro sociological thing that I think of, right? Because it's sort of like we each need certain things in our lives that we used to get from different areas, right? So like church was a big support area for people, right? And their source of community for a long time. Much less so now than it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, right? You know, work was where people found their community for a long time too. You know, you went to the factory, your best friends were the 3 people in the line next to you or whatever it was, you know, or whatever job, you know, and people are starting to find out that like, maybe those aren't the people I want to really be friends with or really have as like close knit, you know, and maybe I work in a company that's completely distributed and my best friends at work is the guy in Indonesia, the guy in UK, you know, the lady in Tulsa, you know, and so on, right? And like, that's my pod, right? But we're all in different places geographically, you know? And so I think figuring out how to sort of connect those folks and make it easier, less friction to have real relationships and connections with stuff is what companies of the future need to think about and have a plan for, right? Because if you really want to retain workers, especially in an environment where it's so easy to quit a job and go get another job without even leaving your desk, you know, I think creating community or also thinking about the outside needs of folks, you know, like all these different things need to be thought of in a holistic manner. But it's also, look, to be fair, I don't know if a company needs to be responsible for all these aspects of someone's lives, right? You know, and there was a little bit of controversy over that, like a year ago when Coinbase was like, no talk of politics at work, right? You know, but for a lot of people, work was the only place they had where there was an audience. You know, there wasn't like, they didn't have other people to talk to or peers that they respected that they felt they could talk to outside of work, you know? And so like finding that balance, or, you know, Coinbase could have said like, here's money to fund this group that, you know, outside, you know, like, here's a $500 a month to start a book club, you know, or whatever it is, you know, and like that could be an interesting type of perk that has nothing to do with the in-office situation, so to speak, you know. So I think we have to think about like getting rid of the constructs that this is the fixed space, this is how work has always been done, and this is why it has to be done this way forever. I think getting rid of that notion and thinking about like, we have a blank canvas and we can sort of paint our picture of what work looks like, but being cognizant of the dynamics that everyone as a unique individual is what I think is key to the future of work, right? I don't know how you invest along those lines, you know, but that's your job, not my job. So.
No, everything you said, I agree with. Like, you have to focus on the individual, because people, and very much so to what Maria said, it's like people are building their own brand, so they don't need a company anymore. Granted, we still need like means to be able to live our lives, but the narrative has shifted. And so once companies realize like, you don't have to micromanage to the point where you prevent people from being who they are, that's when the companies are going to soar, because then you're going to leverage the creativity of those people that you've already employed and use it to your advantage. So I think there's like a difference in like controlling how people think and kind of setting them up for success. So it's more so less of the assembly line and more of like a basketball team you're gonna coach me to be the best player that I can be. And when I'm the best player, the whole team benefits. That's how I kind of view the new work landscape.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's scary for brands, because it's one, less control, and two, like, okay, you invest so much in this person and then they can leave. So like, how does,
But to follow on to that, Maria, like, I don't think we as individuals, as employees, like I'm speaking from an employee standpoint, I don't know if we should all think that we owe the companies loyalty for life, right? Like the lifetime employment of our parents' generation doesn't exist anymore, you know? So there is this balance that has to be struck between the individual's sort of identity and sort of what their function is in sort of the cog of the, of the machine versus, thinking like where their career trajectory is going and all that stuff, right? So there is a level of more autonomy that needs to be thought of, I think, from an individual perspective, and also sort of self-governance and self-direction. But like, I think if you look at how people advance in their careers, it's not just sitting in the same seat for 40 years anymore, right? Like you're never going to get the same career economic gains that you would have if you're jumping around and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. No, I'm thinking like, do they feel like if I invest in you to help you grow your personal brand and then you leave, like, how am I, like, I'm not going to see them. But it's very short-sighted again.
That's a transactional, that's a thing that you know that you're investing in them for now. You're not investing in them for 10 years from now for their brand, right? Because you probably don't have the career ladder stuff built in to support them 10 years from now, growth-wise, right? And so, I don't know. I again, these are things that like the employers need to think about and like the role of HR in companies is also going to shift too. You know, like the HR person isn't just like signing off papers and hiring and firing people anymore. Like they're part of the cultural growth of a company now too.
There definitely needs to be some reorganization of HR, for the mere fact that like HR to me now is such this umbrella term, and maybe it's the big umbrella that governs everything, but it's like you have to think about legal. Now you have to think about people on the investment side of investing into people. You got to think about community culture. Then you also got to think about logistics from a remote first company perspective of like how we're actually going to get our people to connect to each other. How do you engage them? It's like HR, I don't even know. What do you think they're going to call HR?
Well, now it's more called like just people. Which is interesting. Yeah. It's very broad, so it'll fit everything in, I guess.
That's true. Do they separate, like, well, I guess for Brex, we have like a people team, we have a legal team. So maybe they're starting to like break it up a little more, you think?
I think it all depends on the size of your company, right?
True.
Like if you're under 50 people, you're probably just hiring your first HR person, you know, whereas if you're the size of Brex or, you know, like I work for the University of Miami, there's 18,000 employees, right? Like there's probably 500 people in HR, you know, or whatever it is.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation about so many different things, including future work. So I want to thank you again, Jeanine, for coming on. Any last plugs, anything you want to share and make sure people are aware of?
Yes, you too can invest. I'm super focused on, really honestly, like this is very near and dear to my heart, empowering people who never thought that they could invest or never even thought about it, and showing them that with $1,000, because that's the minimum buy-in for my syndicate, with $1,000, like you can invest in top companies, gain a small piece and build up your portfolio. So I just want people out there to understand that you don't have to have millions of dollars to invest in dope startups. Just that's my quick plug. And then you can at me at Jeanine Suah. It's my first and last name on Twitter and also LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was really fun.
Anytime. We love you. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us. This was episode 66 of the Miami Tech Pod.